I kissed my high school archenemy 10 years later. His lips were soft, softer than I'd imagined during those stolen glances throughout the day. The kiss tasted like the cheap coffee from the community center and something sweeter, more addictive. My fingers found their way into his dark hair as he pressed me against the brick wall behind the building, the rough surface catching on my designer shirt. I should have known better, really I should have, but there was something about the way he'd been looking at me all day, those green eyes following my every move as we hauled boxes and assembled furniture. Something about the way his t-shirt clung to his shoulders and how his laugh made my stomach flip in ways I hadn't felt in years. Now with his body pressed against mine and the sunset painting everything gold, I couldn't remember why I'd been so hesitant to come back to this town in the first place. Then he pulled back and reality crashed in like a bucket of ice water. "Wait," he said, breathing hard. "Jason? Jason Chen?" My blood froze. That tone of recognition, the way he said my name. Suddenly, I was 17 again, hiding in the library during lunch breaks, deleting social media accounts and changing my routes between classes. "Holy shit," he whispered, taking a step back. "It is you." And just like that, I recognized him too. The green eyes that used to narrow with cruel amusement, the mouth that had just kissed me senseless was the same one that had once spat words sharp enough to draw blood. How did I not recognize him? Derek Sullivan, my high school tormentor. The reason I'd fled this town and never looked back. 12 hours earlier. "It's just community service, Jason," I muttered, mimicking my mother's voice as I pulled up to the Riverside Community Center. "You work remotely anyway, so it won't disturb your job. They really need your help." What she really meant was, "You've been hiding in Manhattan for 10 years, and it's time to face your hometown and whatever scared you off." I knew my mother would not back off once she had that determined glint in her eye, so I'd made a deal. Help out for 2 weeks, go back to the city, and she'd stop trying to convince me to move back. I'm different now. Successful. The nervous kid who used to flinch at his own shadow was gone, replaced by someone who closed million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. My burgundy-highlighted hair and tailored clothes were armor, protecting me from the memories this place held as I walked into the center itself. "You must be Jason," a curly-haired woman bounded down the steps. "Hi, I'm Sarah, the coordinator. Thank you for volunteering. We've got you down for the heavy lifting team today." "Lucky me," I said, managing a smile as I followed her inside. That's when I saw him for the first time. The man I thought was just a hot stranger. He was helping move a desk, muscles flexing under his white t-shirt. Dark hair fell into his eyes as he concentrated, and something about him made my mouth go dry. Wow. He looked up, those green eyes meeting mine across the room, and smiled. Not the predatory grin I would have remembered, but something warm, genuine. Something that made my heart skip. "Need another pair of hands?" he called out, already walking over. Sarah beamed. "Perfect! You two can tackle the donation sorting room together." If I'd known then what I know now, I would have run for my car. But instead, I just smiled back, letting myself get pulled into his orbit like I had a choice in the matter. That's the thing about karma. It's got a twisted sense of humor. And apparently, it had decided that the guy I'd been secretly checking out all day, the one who just given me the best kiss of my life, was the same one who made high school a living hell. "Welcome home, Jason." 8 hours before the kiss. "So what does a hotshop app developer do for fun in Manhattan?" he asked, hefting another box of donations onto the sorting table. The movement made his biceps flex, and I pretended not to notice. "Wouldn't you like to know?" I shot back, focusing on a folding pile of clothes instead of how good he smelled, like cedar and coffee and trouble. He leaned against the table, way too close, grinning. "Actually, I would. That's why I asked." The playful tone in his voice made me look up. Mistake. Those green eyes were twinkling with mischief, and there was a smudge of dust on his cheek that my fingers itched to wipe away. "Mostly work," I admitted, though occasionally I let my friends drag me to overpriced clubs where the music's too loud and the drinks are mostly ice. "Sounds lonely." His voice had softened, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. Says the guy spending his Saturday lifting heavy things with strangers. "Not strangers anymore, though, right?" he said, and picked up a designer scarf from the donation pile and wrapped it around my neck with exaggerated flair. "Now we're fashion consultants together." I laughed despite myself, the silk warm against my skin. "Pretty sure this is women's wear." "And you're rocking it," he said as he was standing close enough now that I could see flecks of gold in his eyes. "The burgundy in your hair, it works with this." My cheeks heated as I asked him, "Are you always this flirty with your fellow volunteers?" "Only the cute ones who look like they need to smile more." Before I could process that, Sarah stuck her head in. "Lunch break, guys. Pizza's here." We ended up sitting on the center's back steps, paper plates balanced on our knees. The autumn sun felt good, and somehow our shoulders kept brushing, even though there was plenty of room on the steps. "You're different than I expected," he said suddenly. "Oh? And what did you expect?" He took a bite of pizza, considering. "Well, when they announced that a city boy was coming, I thought you would be someone more uptight? But you're funny. Real." "Sorry to disappoint," I said with a grin. "Trust me." His eyes traveled down my body slowly enough to make me shiver. "Disappointment is not the word I'd use." The afternoon continued like that. Loaded glances, casual touches that felt anything but casual, conversations that danced on the edge of something more. We worked our way through mountains of donations, and I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone about my life in New York, my apps, my dreams. By the time sunset painted the sky pink and orange, we'd cleared the entire room. He high-fived me, his hand lingering against mine a moment too long. "We make a good team," he said softly. "Yeah," I breathed, hyper-aware of how close we were standing. "We do." "Listen, he started, then glanced around at the few remaining volunteers. "Want to get some air?" My heart raced. "Sure." He led me out the back door, around the corner where the brick wall met the old oak tree. The setting sun cast long shadows, and crickets were starting their evening song. "I've been wanting to do something all day," he murmured, stepping closer. What's that?" My voice came out embarrassingly breathy. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb brushing across my bottom lip. "This. Stop me if you don't want this, Jay." I made a small sound, but I didn't stop him. And then he was kissing me, pressing me against the wall, and everything else disappeared. His mouth was soft but insistent, tasting of coffee and possibilities. My fingers found their way into his hair as he deepened the kiss, making a sound low in his throat that sent heat spiraling through me. It was perfect, until he pulled back and said my name in that tone of shocked recognition. And suddenly, I wasn't living in a romance novel anymore. I was living in a nightmare, because the guy who just given me the best kiss of my life, he was Derek Sullivan, the same Derek Sullivan who made it his mission to destroy me in high school, and I just spent all day falling for him. Karma really was a bitch. The next day, I didn't sleep. How could I, when my lips still burned from kissing the guy who'd once written the bitter F word across my locker in permanent marker, the same guy who'd made a game of accidentally shouldering me into walls between classes. The morning sun crept through my childhood bedroom window, painting patterns on the ceiling I used to stare at during countless sleepless nights just like this one, except back then I was hiding from Derek Sullivan. Now I was hiding from the memory of his lips on mine, his hands in my hair, and the look of genuine shock on his face when he recognized me. My phone buzzed for the 12th time since last night. "Jason, please, we need to talk. I know you probably hate me. You should hate me. But I'm not that person anymore. At least let me explain." The last message just said, "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." I turned my phone face down and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. What was there to explain? That he'd grown up, found enlightenment, decided tormenting queer kids wasn't a fun hobby anymore? "Honey?" Mom knocked softly. "I made pancakes." Of course she did. Comfort food was her love language. "Not hungry," I called back, wincing at how rough my voice sounded. A pause then. "Sarah called. Said you might want to switch to the library renovation project instead of the community center this week." My throat tightened. Sarah had seen us. Had she seen everything? The kiss, the recognition? My mad dash to the car, leaving Derek standing there with his hand still reaching out to stop me for whatever reason? "Yeah," I managed. "That would be good. It would be better if I didn't have to go back at all, but a deal was a deal." Another message buzzed, this time from Mike. "Yo, why do I have Derek Sullivan asking for your number? Told him to fuck off, but what's going on?" I texted back. "Long story. Thanks for having my back." "Always. Want to grab a coffee and talk about it later? We've not seen each other since you got back in town." I smiled. "Tomorrow, I promise. Need to process." But processing meant remembering, and remembering meant facing the fact that the gentle way Derek had cupped my face didn't match the memory of him laughing as his friends knocked my books out of my hands. That soft apology in his text didn't erase the sharp words he'd thrown at me for 3 years straight, or the tiny traitorous voice wondering if people really could change that much. I dragged myself to the shower, letting the hot water wash away the ghost of his touch. My reflection in the foggy mirror looked like a stranger. Successful app developer Jason Chen, with his carefully styled hair and expensive clothes, barely recognizable as the scared kid who'd once hidden in a bathroom stalls during lunch. Mom was waiting in the kitchen, pancakes getting cold on the table. "Want to tell me why Sarah called?" she asked gently. I sat down, poking at the pancakes with my fork. "Remember Derek Sullivan?" Her hand stilled on her coffee mug. "The boy who—" "Yeah, that one." I forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. "Turns out he volunteers at the community center, and I didn't recognize him until after—" "After?" "After I let him kiss me." I winced, even as my body tightened in pleasure. The words hung in the air between us. Mom set down her mug carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something more fragile than ceramic. "Oh, sweetheart." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "It was just unexpected. I'll switch to the library project, finish my 2 weeks, and go back to New York. No big deal." She gave me her patented mom look. "You know, people can change a lot in 10 years. "Mom, I'm just saying. The boy I remember wouldn't have been caught dead doing community service," she paused. "Or kissing at another boy." That hit like a punch to the gut. I hadn't even thought about that part. Derek Sullivan apparently kissing men now? The universe really did have a sick sense of humor. My phone buzzed again, a new message, longer this time. "I know you probably won't read this, but I need to say it. I was horrible to you. The worst kind of bully. The kind who was so scared of himself that he hurt others to feel better. It took years of therapy to admit that, to admit a lot of things. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but you should know that seeing you again, not recognizing you at first, it showed me exactly how far I've come from that angry, terrified kid, and how far I still have to go. I'm sorry, Jason, for everything." I stared at the message until the words blurred. "Honey?" Mom's voice was soft. "The library really does need help this week, but running away didn't solve anything 10 years ago." "I'm not running," I protested. "I'm just—" "Choosing the easier path?" She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Sometimes the harder roads lead somewhere worth going." I looked down at my phone again, at Derek's raw honesty glowing on the screen, at the memory of his smile when he wrapped that ridiculous scarf around my neck before either of us knew who the other was. Maybe she was right. Maybe we both deserved the chance to find out. I picked up my phone and started typing. 3 days later. "Coffee, neutral ground. You get the chance to explain." That's all I texted back. Now I sat in Corner Cup, the local coffee shop that had replaced the old diner, watching the door like it might bite me. My hands wrapped around my third Americano, which probably wasn't helping the anxiety twisting my stomach into knots. Mike had offered to sit at a nearby table just in case. I declined, but I could see him through the window at the bookstore across the street, pretending to browse but definitely keeping watch. Some things never change, like best friends who still had your back a decade later. The bell above the door chimed. Derek walked in and my heart did that stupid flutter thing again. "Stop it," I scolded. His hair was damp from the morning drizzle, curling slightly at his temples. He dressed up, or his version of it anyway, trading yesterday's casual wear for a forest green button-down that made his eyes look impossibly brighter. Those eyes found me immediately. He hesitated, uncertainty written across features I'd spent all day memorizing yesterday before everything went sideways. I didn't wave him over, but I didn't run either. Progress, maybe. "Hi," he said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for giving me the chance to—" "Why did you kiss me?" The question burst out before I could stop it. His eyes widened slightly. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that shouldn't have been attractive. "Because I wanted to. Because you were brilliant and funny and gorgeous, and I spent all day trying to work up the courage." "Oh." "And you really didn't recognize me?" I asked. "No." He leaned forward intense. "God, Jason, if I had, I wouldn't have. I mean, I still would have wanted to, but I would have talked to you first, explained, apologized." "Like you're doing now," I shot back, ruder than I intended to. He flinched. "I deserve that." "You deserve a lot worse." "I know," he said quietly, looking down. Silence stretched between us, heavy with a decade of unspoken words. "Why did you do it?" I finally asked. "Back then, was it just because I was an easy target? The quiet Asian kid who jumped at his own shadow?" "No," he said quickly. Then, "Yes, maybe. It was complicated." I laughed harshly. "Complicated? Explain complicated, Derek." "I was terrified," he said quietly. "All the time, of my dad finding out, of the thoughts I couldn't stop having, of wanting," he swallowed hard, "wanting things I'd been taught were wrong. And you were everything I couldn't let myself be. Smart, Kind, confident in your own quiet way. I wasn't confident. I was surviving, I said. I know. Now. He stared down at his hands. It took years of therapy after my dad finally caught me in the act. Years to understand that I'd been hurting you because I couldn't stand how much He trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words anyway. How much he'd wanted. How much he'd feared. How much he'd hated himself. I understood him. That doesn't make it okay, I said. No, it doesn't, he met my eyes again. Nothing makes it okay. I was cruel and stupid and scared, and I took it out on you because you were brave enough to be yourself. I spent 10 years trying to become someone better, someone worthy of, he gestured vaguely, of yesterday, of that kiss, of you. And who are you now? The question seemed to surprise him. He thought for a moment. I'm an environmental engineer. I design water purification systems for developing countries. I volunteer because giving back matters. I'm out to my family. What's left of it after Dad left. I'm in therapy. I'm single because casual doesn't feel right anymore. His voice softened. And I'm still the guy who spent yesterday falling for you all over again, even if I didn't know it was you. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten between my hands. All over again? The words were out of my mouth before I could even think about it. Color crept up his neck. Why do you think you were my target? The quiet kid who sat in the library reading engineering books and coding on his laptop? You were fascinating, terrifying, everything I wanted and couldn't let myself have. So you hurt me instead. So I hurt you instead, he agreed quietly. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jason. I just needed you to know the truth. All of it. He started to stand. Wait, the word that just left my mouth surprised us both. That scarf yesterday, I said slowly. The one you put around my neck. You said the burgundy in my hair worked with it. He nodded, confused by the sudden topic change. The old Derek Sullivan wouldn't have known what burgundy was, I continued. Wouldn't have noticed my highlights. Wouldn't have spent the day making me laugh or telling me about his work or kissed me like I mattered, I whispered slowly but firmly enough for him to listen. His breath caught. You always mattered. I just didn't know how to handle that then. I stood up, pushing my cold coffee aside. I can't forgive you. Not yet, I said. I understand. The resignation in his voice made something twist in my chest. But, I continued, maybe we can start over, as the people we are now, slowly. Hope bloomed across his face, cautious but real. Yeah? Yeah, text me. We'll talk, figure out who we are to each other now, I said. His fingers brushed mine as I shifted my hand on the table to get up, sending that same electric shock through me that I felt yesterday. Thank you, he whispered. I nodded, gathering my things at the door. I turned back. Derek? Yeah? For what it's worth, yesterday, before I knew, that was a really good kiss, I said with a slight smile on my face. His startled laugh followed me out into the rain, where Mike was pretending he hadn't been watching the whole time. You okay? He asked carefully. I looked down at my phone, where a new message already waited. Thank you for the second chance. I won't waste it. Yeah, I said, surprised to find I meant it. I think I will be. 1 week later. The thing about second chances is they're terrifying. Every text, every conversation, every shared moment feels like defusing a bomb. One wrong move and everything explodes. But Derek was patient. He texted random thoughts throughout the day. Just saw a guy wearing a scarf exactly like the one from the community center. Made me smile. Working on a water filtration project. Think you'd find the coding interesting. Remember how you said you missed a real Chinese food in Manhattan? Mom and Pop place on Oak Street still makes the best dumplings in town. I found myself looking forward to them. Found myself responding more and more. Found myself wondering if this was what it felt like to meet someone at exactly the right time, even if it was the wrong person. Or maybe the right person, who used to be the wrong person. We were both at the community center again. Me because Mom was right about running away. Him because he actually belonged there. We kept our distance at first, professional and polite, but I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. His eyes soft in a way that made my chest tight. The kids' coding program needs more volunteers, Sarah mentioned casually one afternoon, not even trying to be subtle. You two would be perfect. This is how I ended up sitting next to Derek in a room full of teenagers teaching basic programming while hyper-aware of his arm occasionally brushing mine as we leaned over to help students. You're good at this, he said quietly during a break. Teaching, making them feel confident. Unlike some people's teaching methods, I replied, but there was no real bite to it. He winced anyway. I deserve that. Sorry, old habits, I said. Don't apologize. I earned every jab. I looked at him then, really looked. The way his shoulders tensed whenever I referenced the past, the genuine remorse in his eyes, the careful distance he maintained unless I moved closer first. You're good at this too, I said finally. The kids trust you. His smile was like a sunrise. Yeah? Yeah. After class, we found ourselves alone in the supply room, putting away laptops. The space felt smaller than it was, charged with something that had been building all afternoon. Jason? I know we're taking things slow, and I respect that, but I really want to, he said before he was cut off. I turned too quickly, stumbled on a loose power cord. His hands caught my waist, steadying me. We ended up chest to chest, his breath warm against my cheek. Hold you, he finished softly. My heart hammered against my ribs. That's not taking it slow. I know. His thumbs drew small circles on my hips, sending shivers up my spine. Tell me to stop. I should have, but instead I found myself leaning into him, pressing my face into his neck, his arms wrapped around me, properly holding me like I was something precious. This okay? He whispered into my hair. I nodded, breathing in cedar and coffee, and Derek. His heart raced under my palm, matching mine beat for beat. I dreamed about that kiss, he confessed, so quietly I almost missed it. Then I wake up and remember I don't deserve to. I pulled back enough to see his face, keeping my hands on his chest. You're right. You don't deserve to. He started to let go, but I gripped his shirt. But maybe we both deserve the chance to make new memories. Better ones, I whispered. His eyes dropped to my mouth. Jason. I rose up on my toes and pressed a soft, quick kiss to the corner of his lips. A promise, maybe. Or a beginning. That's all you get for now, I murmured, stepping back. He touched his fingers to the spot I'd kissed, looking dazed. I'll take it. I'll take anything you're willing to give. Walk me to my car? I asked. Outside, the summer evening was warm and golden. We walked close enough for our hands to brush, sending little sparks up my arm each time. Text me when you get home, he asked at my car. Getting protective, Sullivan? His expression turned serious. Always, just differently now. I caught his hand, squeezed once, and let go. I'll text you. Later that night, I sent, made it home. And Derek, that hug was okay. His response came immediately. Just okay? Guess I'll have to do better next time, if there is a next time. I smiled at my phone. Yeah, there will be. Because maybe Mom was right. Maybe the harder road did lead somewhere worth going. And maybe, just maybe, that somewhere was here, creating something new with someone who'd learned how to be better, who looked at me now like I hung the moon instead of like I was a target. Time will tell. But for now, I had the memory of his arms around me, the ghost of his heartbeat under my palm, and the knowledge that sometimes the best stories start with second chances. Next time, I texted back, I might let you kiss me properly. I'll spend every day until then earning it, he replied. And I believed him. 2 weeks later. Stop looking at me like that, I mumbled into my coffee cup. Derek's grin widened across our cafe table. Like what? Like you're planning something, I said. Can't a guy admire his... He paused, that adorable crinkle appearing between his brows. What are we calling this? I kicked his foot under the table. Dating! We're dating, unless you have objections. The smile he gave me could have powered the whole town. No objections, just making sure I'm allowed to call you my boyfriend. My heart did that flip thing it had been doing a lot lately. You're such a sap. Only for you. He reached across the table, fingers intertwining with mine. Speaking of which, are you free tonight? Why? Because I have a surprise. The surprise turned out to be the community center's rooftop, transformed. String lights twinkled overhead, creating a magical dome of light. A picnic blanket was spread out, surrounded by cushions, and what looked like every pride flag in existence. Derek, I breathed. Too much? He ran a nervous hand through his hair. Sarah helped, said we could use the space. It's perfect, I turned to face him. But why? He stepped closer, hands finding my waist like they belonged there. Because I wanted to do this right. Because you deserve romance and grand gestures, and... I cut him off with a kiss. He made a surprised sound against my mouth before pulling me closer, deepening the kiss until we were both breathless. Was that okay? I whispered against his lips. God, yes. His fingers tightened on my hips. I've been dying to kiss you properly again. What's stopping you? I said. He didn't need to be asked twice. The kiss was different from our first. No hesitation, no hidden identities, just us. His hand slid up my back as mine found their way into his hair. When he nipped at my bottom lip, I gasped, and he took advantage, tongue sliding against mine in a way that made my knees weak. Wait, he panted, pulling back slightly. The food will get cold. I chased his lips. Don't care. He laughed, pressing his forehead to mine. Let me do this right. Dinner first, then his eyes darkened. Then we can explore this further. Such a tease, I said. You love it. The scary thing was that I did. We settled on the blanket, and he'd thought of everything. My favorite dumplings from Oak Street, wine, even dessert from our bakery downtown. You know, I said between bites, for someone who claims they're earning my trust, you're making it really hard to not fall for you. His expression softened. Maybe that's the point. Sneaky. Strategic, he corrected, stealing a dumpling from my plate, like how I strategically volunteered for every project you were on. I noticed that. Good. He leaned over, kissing the sauce from the corner of my mouth. You were supposed to. The casual intimacy of it made my chest tight. Derek? I forgive you, I murmured. He went still. What? I forgive you. I took his hand, pressing it over my heart. The past. It happened. We can't change it, but this person you are now, the one who arranges rooftop picnics and steals my food and looks at me like I'm precious, this person is someone worth falling for. Tears shone in his eyes. Jason. So yes, I forgive you, and yes, you can call me your boyfriend, and yes, I pulled him closer. You can kiss me again. He did, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we broke apart, he was smiling through his tears. I love you, he whispered. I think I have since that day at the community center. Maybe even before in some confused teenage way, but now, knowing who you are, who I am, I love you. Instead of answering, I pushed him back onto the cushion, straddling his hips. His hands immediately found my waist, steadying me. Show me, I challenged. His eyes darkened. Here? Not everything, I laughed, but I wouldn't mind making out under the stars. Romantic. I learned from the best, I replied. Hours later, we lay tangled together on the blanket, his head on my chest as he pointed out constellations. My lips were swollen from kissing, my shirt wrinkled from his wandering hands, and I'd never been happier. Move in with me, he said suddenly. I propped myself up to look at him. What? I know it's fast, but you're working remotely anyway, and I have that big house on Cedar Street. The Victorian with the pride flag in the window. That's yours? He grinned. Bought it last year. Plenty of room for a home office, great water pressure, really comfortable bed. Are you propositioning me, Sullivan? Is it working? I pretended to think about it. The water pressure is tempting. He flipped us suddenly, pinning me beneath him. Just the water pressure? Well, I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him closer. Maybe I can think of a few other benefits. Like? Like waking up together, I kissed his jaw. Making breakfast, his neck. Working from home, his collarbone. Coming home to you. He captured my mouth in a searing kiss. Is that a yes? Yes, another kiss. Yes to moving in, yes to us, yes to everything. 6 months later, our housewarming party was in full swing. The Victorian was filled with friends, family, and enough food to feed an army. Mom was showing Sarah baby pictures, Mike was manning the grill, and Derek was watching me from across the room like I was still the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. What? I mouthed. He crossed to me, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. Just thinking about how lucky I am. Sap? You're sap. I turned in his arms. Promise? His answer was a kiss that made several guests wolf whistle. Get a room, Mike called. Derek pulled back, grinning. We have several. It's our house. Our house, I echoed, loving how it sounded. Later, after everyone had gone home, we slowly danced in our kitchen to no music at all. Thank you, he murmured into my hair. For what? For giving me a second chance. For loving me. For making this house a home. I lifted my head from his shoulder. Thank you for becoming someone worth loving. His kiss tasted like promise and forever and coming home. Conclusion. Sometimes we still went to the community center to volunteer. Well, that storage room had some very good memories now, even better ones than before. After all, the best love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about people who choose each other again and again, especially when it isn't easy. We chose each other, and every day we kept choosing. That was better than perfect. That was real. The end. Do you believe that people can change? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.